قاعدين على باب البيت
يعني داخلين الأرض
مقاومين وكأنهم منفلتين عن القانون.
Coming up on Jerusalem Dateline, intense fighting in South Gaza as the IDF encircles Khan Yunis, and an exclusive interview with Israeli government spokesman Ilan Levy on the country's resolve to defend itself and fight the ongoing war of misinformation. Plus, remembering the fallen on Holocaust Remembrance Day and on the holiday of the trees known as Tu B'Shvat. We'll also see how CBN Israel is supporting IDF soldiers who have no family in Israel. All this and more coming up on this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. Hello and welcome to this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. I'm Chris Mitchell. The International Court of Justice released its ruling on charges of genocide against Israel. Meanwhile, in Gaza, Israel's ground war against Hamas is escalating. The court ruled that South Africa has standing to bring the case and that enough evidence exists for a trial to go forward.
In light of the following, the court concludes that, prima facie, it has jurisdiction pursuant to Article 9 of the Convention to entertain the case. Given this conclusion, the court considers that it cannot accede to Israel's request that the case be removed from the general list.
However, the judges did not grant South Africa's request for an immediate ceasefire. The court issued several conditional measures on Israel, including preventing acts of genocide, prevent the incitement of genocide. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu responded to the decision by the court.
The charge of genocide leveled against Israel is not only false, it's outrageous, and decent people everywhere should reject it. On the eve of the International Holocaust Remembrance Day, I again pledge as Israel's Prime Minister, never again.
The IDF is now operating in the heart of Khan Yunis in southern Gaza. Defense Minister Yoav Gallant said hundreds of Hamas terrorists are dead underground and many have surrendered. The IDF spokesman tells CBN News a hit on an UNRWA building that killed 9 people was not an Israeli air or artillery strike. It's reviewing its ground operations and the possibility it was Hamas fire. In the meantime, President Biden dispatched CIA Director William Burns to meet with Israeli and Qatari leaders to work on a deal to release all the hostages in exchange for an extended pause in the fighting. The meeting is complicated by leaked audio of Benjamin Netanyahu criticizing Qatar in a meeting with Israeli hostage families.
Why do they have leverage? Because they are funding them. I was very angry recently, and I did not hide it from the Americans as they renewed the contract of the military base they have with Qatar.
Founder of Memory that monitors leaders in the region, Yigal Karman, told CBN News he believes Qatar is being disingenuous in the negotiations as longtime supporters of Hamas.
Yes, the Hamas is Qatar. Qatar is Hamas. The leaders are there for years, and billions of dollars were funneled to Gaza to build tunnels, 500 kilometers of tunnels. This is not known because Qatar, this emirate, which is very rich, is playing a double game, a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde game.
Saturday marks the first global International Holocaust Remembrance Day since the October 7th attack. One recent study revealed Nazi and Islamist ideologies share similar views. The Hamas massacre, the worst attack on Jews since the Holocaust, has many allies of the Jewish people declaring, "Never again is now." He may not be in uniform, but he's a soldier on the front lines of Israel's information war. Ilan Levy is an Israeli government spokesman showing up on all possible platforms, sharing information about the war in Gaza and Israel's fight for existence. He stopped by our studio recently. Here's the first excerpt from that interview. Ilan Levy, great to be with you. You're one of the spokesmen in the Israeli spokesman's office. You just started right after the war. Tell us about your experience. Here we are, more than 100 days. What has it been like for you on the front lines of the information battle?
It's been the longest 3 months of any of our lives following the October 7 massacre, an atrocity that none of us imagined could ever happen. And with 136 hostages still trapped in the Hamas terror dungeons where we fear they are being tortured and raped and executed as we speak. And we are seeing a moment of incredible unity in Israeli society right now, as everyone understands that we have to pursue the goal of total victory against the army of terror that is abusing those hostages and telling us that it wants to do this again and again. And as we do that, we are fighting a lot of misinformation. Many people around the world casting the most awful aspersions against Israel as if somehow we want this war, or are deliberately targeting civilians, or are indiscriminately hurting them, when we know that we are fighting to bring the hostages home and to bring to justice the army of terror that wants to commit those atrocities again, while going further than any army in the history of warfare to try to keep civilians on the other side safe from their own leaders' attempts to endanger them.
And yet the world is accusing Israel of genocide. South Africa's taken them to the International Court of Justice. How do you fight this information war, this battle?
It's absurd and it's outrageous, and it is, as Secretary Blinken said, particularly galling, given that the people who are accusing Israel of genocide are the ones who have been perpetrating a literal act of genocide. October 7th was an invasion by armed death squads that sought to murder as many people as possible, as brutally as possible, and the only reason they didn't massacre more people is that we stopped them. October 7th was an act of genocide, and we are fighting now to defend ourselves against the terrorists who say they want to do that again and again until they kill every man, woman, child in our country. That is Hamas. Hamas exists for the sake of war, and therefore for the sake of peace. It must go. And we feel very grateful that our allies have stood by our side. The United Kingdom, the United States, Canada, Australia have all lined up to say that these allegations are completely outrageous. South Africa has unfortunately decided to play advocate for the devil, to act as the legal arm of Hamas, to act as Hamas's lawyers, and to try to shield Hamas from the consequences of its own actions. That's what this case is about. To try to get a court injunction to force Israel to abandon the hostages in the Hamas terror tunnels and keep Hamas on its feet so it can continue planning more acts of genocide like it did on October 7th.
And this battle is it's going on in Gaza, but also it's going on in cities around the world like London, Sydney. You were in Trafalgar Square the other day. What was your message to the crowd?
Our message to the crowd is that we fight not because we want to, but because we must. Because Israel was the victim not only of the bloodiest massacre of Jews since the Holocaust on October 7th, it was the victim of an armed invasion. An armed invasion across our border by air, land and sea, by terrorists hunting people down to kill. We didn't want this war, we didn't start this war, we didn't expect this war, but we have a right to win this war. We have a right to end this war in a way that brings the hostages home and brings Hamas to justice, or else this is going to happen all over again. And it is terrifying to see the pro-Hamas marches on the streets of Western cities all around the world, because that is what they are. If people truly cared about Palestinians, if they truly cared about human rights, they would be demanding one thing: surrender. Hamas should surrender, release the hostages, lay down its arms, and hand over its war criminals for a tribunal. But when they march, calling for a ceasefire that leaves the hostages in the Hamas terror dungeons and Hamas in power, they are marching to save Hamas's skin and to leave it free to plan and perpetrate more October 7th massacres as they happen. And we hope that people around the world see and understand what is happening on their streets and on their campuses, and that this is a threat not only to us here in Israel, but also a threat to the United States and a threat to democracies and freedom around the world.
Coming up, more from Israeli government spokesman Ilan Levy about the hostages still in Gaza and the threat from Hezbollah in the north. Here's the second part of our interview with government spokesman Ilan Levy. Take a look. You have a necklace around you about the hostages. It says, bring them home. And now, a lot of people in Israel know what that is. Maybe people around the world don't know it, but talk about the hostages.
This has become a symbol of the struggle for the hostages. It says in English, bring them home now, and in Hebrew, Halev shelanu shavui be'aza. Our hearts are captive in Gaza. And we're encouraging all people to wear these hostage dog tags to start a conversation. And people ask, what's that funky jewelry you're wearing? And you use it as an opportunity to talk about the 253 men, women and children who were abducted from their beds on October 7th, dragged into the Hamas terror dungeons, some with life-changing injuries, limbs blown off, gunshot wounds to the hands, a third of whom have chronic conditions, who have been held incommunicado, without access to the Red Cross, without medications, without any proof of life to their families.
Yeah. Is there an inversion for some people that are talking about the hostages and wanting them now, blaming the government that they're not doing enough? And yet it's really, as you say, Hamas that's holding them. Is there a danger sometimes that they're blaming the wrong government, the wrong people?
We have no good choices. At the moment, we face very difficult dilemmas and no good choices because we are fighting a war now that Hamas declared against us with the bloodiest massacre of Jews since the Holocaust and the abduction of 253 hostages. And all the suffering that we have seen since October 7th, there is an address for that. And that address is the army of terror, the Iranian proxy that launched this needless and pointless war and has brought destruction and misery to the people of Gaza and the people of Israel.
Right now the focus is on Gaza, but we have Hezbollah in the north. There's a battle, a low-scale war going on there. You have Iranian militias, backed militias in Syria and Iraq. You have the Houthis. In what way is this all part of Iran's plan to destroy Israel?
Iran is the head of the snake. Israel finds itself now under attack on 7 different fronts. Not only Hamas in Gaza, but Hezbollah in Lebanon, which has fired thousands of rockets into northern Israel and forcibly displaced 80,000 Israelis who are now refugees in their own country, staying in hotels up and down the country because they can't go back to homes that are being shelled. We've had missiles fired from the Houthi pirates in Yemen. We've had rockets launched from Syria. The Iraqi militias edging for a fight as well, and of course Iran, and of course the situation in the West Bank, Judea and Samaria, where Hamas has been trying to escalate the conflict. And it's important for the world to understand that this is not a fight between Israel and Hamas. This is a fight between Israel and the much broader forces in the Middle East, Iran, that are trying to destabilize international peace and security in our region, who hate not only Israel, but also the United Kingdom, the United States, and the whole free Western world.
Israel's getting a lot of pressure for a ceasefire to stop. Is Israel government committed to victory, total victory in the Gaza Strip to eliminate Hamas while attempting to get the hostages free?
Israel is committed to total victory over Hamas and bringing the hostages out, and we know that knowing that our allies stand by our side. The United States has been clear from day one that if this happened to the United States, the response would be swift, decisive, and overwhelming. It has given us munitions and diplomatic support and moral support, and even the European Union. The European Parliament voted last week to say no permanent ceasefire until Hamas is dismantled and the hostages are returned. The European Parliament voted in full identification with Israel's war aims. The European Parliament voted for total Israeli victory because it understands that Hamas is going to continue waging war and terror attacks unless it is stopped, and Israel is going to have to stop it. So we're going towards total victory, knowing criticism, sure, including from allies, but they all understand exactly why Israel is fighting, and the free world still wants Israel to win this war.
Ilan Levy, great to be with you.
Thank you very much.
Up next, remembering precious Jewish lives eliminated more than 80 years ago, and on October 7th. Just a few years ago, Israel and the rest of the world marked the 75th anniversary of the liberation of the Auschwitz death camp with declarations of never again. But as CBN Middle East correspondent Julie Stahl tells us, the October 7th massacre changed everything.
Israel has always been sensitive to any comparison to the Holocaust.
Since the Holocaust and the genocide of 6 million Jews in the Second World War, we've always said that nothing could ever compare to the Holocaust. And then October 7th happened. Completely different in scale, but not in its efficiency or barbarity or cruelty.
Hamas murdered more than 1,100 people, including women and children, during the October 7th attack.
It was a massacre in which Hamas death squads reduced whole families to the kind of human ash we haven't seen since Auschwitz. People who could only be identified in some cases by dental implants or pieces of bone because they were literally incinerated. It was a massacre conducted with Nazi-like cruelty, Nazi-like efficiency, and in the service of a Nazi-like ideology. The murder of every Jew in this country, every Israeli in this country, and every Jew in the world.
2 months before the October 7th attack, CBN News visited Poland, where around 3.5 million Jews lived before World War II, the largest Jewish community in the world with a 1,000-year history. When the Nazis invaded Poland in 1939, they put into action Operation Reinhard, the code name for the extermination of Polish Jewry. This is the city of Lublin today, but nearly 85 years ago, it was the SS headquarters.
Here, the Nazis, the SS, the Gestapo, the German army had their base, and it was from here that they planned the murder of over 2 million Polish Jews.
David Pileggi is rector of Christ Church in Jerusalem and regularly brings Christians here on tours to show them the vibrancy of Jewish life before the war and the magnitude of the Nazi destruction of the Jewish people.
And one building in particular where bureaucrats and planners sat, where they organized timetables for trains, dispatched killing units from one Jewish village to another Jewish town, either shot the Jews, put them in ghettos, or eventually sent them to one of 3 death camps in this part of Poland.
The execution-style murders where men, women, and children were shot at close range culminated in a 2-day killing spree. On November 3, 1943, German police and SS guards murdered some 18,000 Jewish prisoners from the Majdanek labor camp and others in the Lublin area and buried them in these grassy pits. It was part of an operation codenamed the Harvest Festival, in which 42,000 Jews were killed in just 2 days. That was the largest Nazi execution ever. Many say it marked the end of 1,000 years of Polish Jewry. Today, Majdanek is a well-preserved testimony to the evil that took place there.
Walking through the barracks, seeing the barbed wire and the watchtowers was absolutely chilling, and definitely brought tears to my eyes, and it was overwhelming. The Jews didn't sign up for war. The Jews were murdered.
Andrew Burkhausen, a recent visitor to Poland, says the scope of the Holocaust was too big to grasp.
When I was at the Majdanek labor camp today, thinking of the 18,000, that's a much smaller number than 6 million. 6 million is, you can't even imagine it. And I tried to imagine the 18,000 and I couldn't even get there. However, by walking through the labor camp and seeing the gas chambers and seeing the physical buildings really allowed me to imagine just one. And that was enough to break me down. And it's really important for people to expose themselves to this history.
Fast forward to October 7th.
And we will now be reflecting on what it means for us that the Nazis are no longer the exclusive, ultimate symbol of evil. Because on October 7th, we came face to face with a force as evil as the Nazis, less successful than the Nazis, but that's only because we stopped them. and we will continue fighting them.
Levy says, unlike the Nazis, Hamas is boasting about what it did.
And all the evidence is out there, and it's out there because Hamas filmed it. Because whereas the Nazis tried to cover up their crimes as the Allies invaded, Hamas proudly recorded everything on its GoPros and sent out the snuff videos on its Telegram channels, because that violence gives violent anti-Semites a thrill. And people are denying it.
And Levy says the Jewish people have an advantage now.
We're now no longer stateless and defenseless and alone. We have a state, we have an army, we have allies, and we will continue to fight against the terrorist monsters who would gladly slaughter all of us in the most brutal way imaginable if given half a chance.
Julie Stahl, CBN News, Poland and Jerusalem.
Still ahead, remembering the souls lost at the Nova Music Festival on Tu B'Shvat, Israel's New Year of the Trees. Israel's Forestry Service is helping to create a living memorial for the hundreds killed at a music festival on October 7th. The tree planting comes as the country marks what's known as the New Year of the Trees. Julie Stahl has that story.
As this year's Tu B'Shvat holiday comes under the shadow of war and death, those responsible for Israel's forests want to focus on new life.
Everyone is welcome here, and we want this area also to have infrastructure for leisure and recreation and symbol of life, and also tell the story of what had happened here, because what had happened here can never happen again. This is something that is beyond human understanding, and this is what we want this place to symbolize.
Here in this beautiful park where flowers are blooming, more than 300 trees were planted today by relatives of those who were murdered at the Nova Music Festival.
We came here today to plant trees for them, to remember them, to give them the respect. We are deeply sad, and we feel that our hearts are taken away from us.
Moran Cohen lost her brother Benjamin Cohen that day.
He was a very good person. He was full of giving and helping other people. That was his way.
Along with a number of his friends.
My brother and his friends were 27. They were 5 friends together. The trees are planted next to each other. Also, they are buried in the same cemetery where we live.
One of those friends included Natalie Amar's brother and Vera Moshe's son, Eden David Moshe.
He was very, very kind. He loved people. He was very good uncle to our kids. He loved life. Ben, Tamar, Dor, and Iftach were very, very best friends with Eden. They raised together in the same school, high school. They finished school together. They were friends during all life.
Eden and his friends had looked forward to the music festival for a long time.
This is what we have left to do, to remember, to tell who wants to hear about who he was, how perfect and special he was in life and also in death.
Natalie says it's hard to be there, but it's important for people to remember and to understand the truth.
It's not fair for us, the families, to see the hate around the world against Israel. This is, I think, the message every person in Israel wants to scream to the world. We are the good people, they are the evil people.
By the trees, we symbolize that the state of Israel is here to stay, and that's how we see it. And that's why we decide to celebrate life due to those horrific actions that were done here by Hamas, and to tell them, you can never break our spirit. We will keep on planting, we will keep on the life here in Israel.
Julie Stahl, Ra'im Park, site of the Nova Music Festival, Southern Israel.
Combat soldiers have said that life on the front lines is harrowing, and it's also lonely. Personal support can make the difference for whether soldiers make it through war psychologically intact or not. Those in the IDF without family in Israel have the option of living in what's known as lone soldier homes. CBN supports some of these homes, and CBN Israel director Daniel Carlson, who fought in the IDF himself, explains his motivation for wanting to be involved.
The military, especially for combat soldiers, you're dealing with situations that nobody prepared you for at all. In Israel, you have the family is an integral part of the support system of a soldier. That means that for a lone soldier who does not have a family support system, you're at a tremendous disadvantage. You don't have the capacity to even process some of the things you're going through. I lost friends in the Army. I had to deal with combat situations. You don't have the experience or background to deal with any of it. When you're on your own, there is no help along the way. So when I got out, I was thinking, this was just a terrible experience. So it was always in my heart, it would be wonderful one day to have some kind of a mechanism to be able to assist, to have a home type of situation where you could have a community around you in absence of family that you don't have. We were able to put it together, rent a home, and start providing this whole mechanism for support for lone soldiers.
I was in a lone soldier's home, knowing that you're going through the same thing as your friend and you're able to help each other out. It can feel a little lonely if you don't have the right support system.
We've got a whole mechanism and a support system in place that really provides for a rejuvenation of the spirit. And every once in a while, especially in times of conflict and hardship, you need that as well. It's just as important as food and shelter.
Well, that's all for this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. Thanks for joining us. Remember, you can follow us on social media and access CBN content through our CBN News and other CBN apps. And please continue to pray for the safety of IDF soldiers, all those caught in harm's way, and for the safe return of all the hostages. I'm Chris Mitchell. We'll see you next time on Jerusalem Dateline.